We've got people kind of joining on, but I want to respect everybody's time,
Okay.
and I want to get started as quickly as we can.
All right. And John, I'm going to ask your permission to, I'm going to ask you to give me permission to record,
Yes, please do that.
if you would.
Yep.
Let's see. Can you make me a co-host?
I would be happy to.
Susan Raposo.
Hi.
Susan, can you make me a co-host?
Oh,
Dave Weatherow here.
I don't know if because I'm considered John Souza. Okay. Actually, David, it's already seems like it's recording.
Yeah.
Well, let's make him co-host anyway. How do we do that, David?
Susan,
participants, I think we go.
If you click on participants, and then if you see me, and my little picture is there, click on the word more, M-O-R-E, on the right-hand side, and you can turn me into a co-host.
So you're going to be the full host because it doesn't say co, so you can be the full.
All right. Okay. then I'll make you a. I'm going to make you a co-host. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so I can't do that.
Okay. Well,
it's perfect.
We're okay.
All right.
We're okay. I just have a couple of things before we start, kind of for the Rhode Islanders in the group, and that is, if you don't know, I want you to know that in about a month, beginning of March, there's going to be a special election in Rhode Island. And the purpose of the election is for us to vote on a number of special bond referendums. In one of those is a housing bond referendum for about $65 million to allow the state to borrow money to help finance the construction of additional low-income subsidized kinds of housing. The time to vote is coming up. If you want to vote in person, most communities are allowing people to vote early at their city hall. If you want to, you can get a mail-in ballot from the Secretary of State's office. If you want to do the mail-in, you need to submit your request, I think within the next week and a half or 2 weeks at most. So even before you have a lot of details, let me encourage you to go ahead and get that mail-in ballot request in. We will be sending, and I think means Plan, the DD Council, probably lots of other people will be sending you direct information about what that all means. But at the bottom line, it really means additional funding for additional housing. So please vote and consider this like one of the first early steps in this process. I see the.
Oops, sorry, John. John, I muted you. Can you unmute yourself? Sorry.
I got it right here. So I see that Bob Marshall is on. Bob will probably have more details coming up, and I'll give him plenty of time to talk about this over our next couple of sessions. But Bob,
John, everybody that's registered to vote should have gotten a mail ballot application in the mail last week or so. If you didn't get a mail ballot, it's probably a problem with your voter registration, which you have very little time to fix right now.
Yeah.
So if you plan on voting and you didn't get a mail ballot application, you need to contact your canvasser right away or the Secretary of State's office right away. because you're either not registered to vote or you're registered at a different address than you're living at.
Yeah.
But with the COVID situation, I think most people are going to vote by mail. So if you did get one of those applications, you should send it back in as soon as possible, which will get you your ballot as quickly as they come out, and you'll have plenty of time to get it back.
Okay, so you'll hear more over time. You'll get emails, you'll get lots of stuff to encourage you. But this is a great opportunity that I want to make sure nobody misses because they didn't know about it. Okay, so welcome everyone. Tonight we have a presentation from some of our neighbors. I've had the good fortune of knowing George Ducharme and Kathy Ludlam for many years. I just discovered, I always thought that George was just an old guy when I first met him. But I now learned tonight that that was not true, that he wasn't that old. He was just prematurely gray, which is a genetic trait that runs in his family. So my apologies, George, for thinking you as being an old man so long ago. But I'm glad that I've known you all these years. And it seems like I've known Kathy for probably as long as I've known George. And they have done some very interesting work in Connecticut for all these 35, 40 years that I've known them. And tonight, we're going to hear a little bit about some of that work that they've done. And we're going to kind of process some of that work maybe next week if we need to. I don't want to overtax Kathy, who is a remarkable person, but who does struggle with long spells of public speaking. But let me introduce George and Kathy. I think, George, you were going to be like kind of leading the introduction to this as far as I remember. So
George, you're muted, so you gotta unmute yourself.
yeah, or maybe David can unmute you, I don't know.
Yeah. George, you have to unmute yourself.
You bingo there. How's that?
You got it.
That's good.
Hey, look, by Jove.
But we lost the camera.
Oh, that's exciting. At least you got the voice. There you go. Oh, start video. Bingo. Bingo. Oh, start. Okay.
You can do it. There we go.
I got
There you
it.
go.
Yay.
Thank you, Kathy.
Go for it, George.
So, John, you want me to get
Why don't you kind of set the table here for us?
yeah,
please?
that's exactly what I'm going to do. That's my my happy role. I thank you for inviting us. First of all, John and all the folks in Rhode Island. It's been a pleasure over the many years having you come down to see us and vice versa. My colleague Pat Beeman is not with us. She, as usual, has other things going on directly with people. And if I'm not a very good techie guy and Zoomer, then she is also the same. But together we do what we can to find the gifts and abilities and dreams of people, and then find out how to make them happen. And that's sort of the short story of of our involvement with Kathy. It began in 86, actually, 1986, when David came to Connecticut to present. And he presented a vision of something that we had never seen before. And that was of a cooperative in which one of the people he was assisting, the family and individual he was assisting, that had a significantly severe disability. Kathy was there at these gatherings that we had put together, similar to what you're doing, John, and bringing people in to give us ideas and thoughts. She was there as a journalist, actually, had made comments on the follow-up to the first report, which was John McKnight. We got a philosophical experience in community building. And then David was second, and he came along, and the review document that Kathy sent to us had in 3-inch letters. I mean, she made it clear we needed to see this. If anything like this comes to Connecticut, call me. David's presentation on cooperatives really struck her very, very much. She will tell her own story, but that's how our life together with Kathy began. We were beginning what we call circles of support. There are various other names for bringing people together to assist one of the members to achieve their dream. So we had Kathy indicated she'd like to begin a circle, and we did this with Beth Mount, Pat Beeman, and myself, with Kathy, her family, and her friends. And she will describe in more detail how this came to be. But basically, from my perspective, and in the many, many circles of support that we in what we call Comunitas have done is to find some concrete link to a dream they may have. And we do call it dream. You could call it a plan or a vision or something of that sort. But we surprised a number of people by asking them what they wanted. One of our friends who have since passed, Regina Damaris, in her comments about what we had done, said, she was confused because usually she was asked to choose between 3 parts of a program. And we did not have a program. We do not work with people. We walk with people, as we say. And so when walking with Kathy, we began to find out a little bit more what her dream was. And although we knew nothing about cooperatives, literally, except for what David had said, I guess in a couple of weeks, you'll meet Sarah, and she will describe in greater detail some of the nuts and bolts, and Kathy will describe how she took what we began to learn about this thing called cooperatives and make her dream come true. So I guess in terms of the gathering of families right now, don't give up on visions and dreams, and don't give up on hope, and take advantage of every possible resource you may have that may come from a conversation or from a book or from someone that you may know, or each other now in the small group you have right there. So thank you again for inviting me and inviting the Comunitas family. And Kathy, I turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, George, and hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah?
Yep,
Okay,
perfect.
I'm giving people time to turn their sound up more if they need to. But thank you, George, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I want to start with just 2 ideas at the beginning, and then I'm going to walk you through the story that George alluded to, that has become quite a thing over the last 35 years or so. The first thing I want to say is it's a little funny talking about this now, like 35 years later, because I'm from a different state than you all, and this is a different decade. And even if we went to do the exact same thing over again, the landscape has changed. So what I'm going to do is not tell you how to do it, but tell you how things came together for us so that you can hopefully make things come together for you and your family members. Your vision and path and resources will be different from ours, but you will have a great outcome if you persevere and you don't get discouraged. The other thing I want to start with is that everything in this story is based on relationships. Nothing would have happened if I hadn't met Pat and George and Beth and David, and nothing would have happened without my circle, and nothing would have happened without all the other people that we met along the way. So even though we are here to talk about housing, we are also here to talk about relationships, because that's what makes everything go. So with that as an opener, here's a little bit of background. In high school, I went to a high school that was a day school within a hospital. So all of my high school friends all had significant enough disabilities that for one reason or another, we were not being educated in our hometown. And you know, that's a whole nother story, but I noticed throughout high school that one by one, my friends were disappearing, and they were disappearing because they were getting too big for their families to manage at home without support. And this is in the 1970s, so it was just families. Nobody had any help. And so friends of mine were going one by one to live at a big institution a couple of towns over. And I went and visited them in the summer, and I went to visit them here and there. And I looked around and I thought, is this where I'm going to end up too? And I didn't really like it there, and I didn't like that they were there. But this put a very strong motivation in me to want to have a different life than what was happening to my friends. And how that was going to go, I didn't know. When George mentioned my family, for all practical purposes in Connecticut, my family was my mom. My father died when I was 8 years old, so he was sadly not in the picture very long. My mom took excellent care of me and made sure I got a good education and did everything she could to give me a good life. And she succeeded at that. But having lost my dad, I lived in fear all the time. What if something happens to my mom too? And there was nobody else. My mom did all my care 24/7 unless I was in the hospital, which thankfully I wasn't too often, or I went to camp in the summer or during the school day. Other than that, it was her only. So I needed a whole lot of support, physical support to get up and get dressed, get, clean and eat and do all the things that you need to do in a day. And I used to sit around with a calculator and a pad of paper because I was heading for college and I was hoping to head out and get a good job after college, but I started trying to figure out how I was going to get enough support to move out on my own and live independently. And that calculator was a mean thing because even at, in those days, minimum wage, which isn't good, but you have to start with some number. I could not figure out how I could pay for all that support and an apartment and how I was going to do all that on a job that I knew would probably be part-time, given the level of my disability. I can't do 40 hours in a week. So I was just sort of stuck in that for a long time. Even through college, I mused and worried about this. And then a couple years after college is when I met Pat and George and Beth and David, and I had no idea what was coming. Unable to figure out my housing dilemma, I just focused on work, and I got a position at our state office of protection and advocacy. And they sent me, as George said, as a journalist to attend this conference that Communitas was putting on. It wasn't Communitas yet, but it was the forerunner of Communitas. And the second day when David talked about housing cooperatives, and this young lady, also a Catherine, like me, who had really significant disabilities and how she was living independently, I thought, wow, I wonder if something like this could work for me also. So as George said, I expressed my interest very big on the evaluation sheet because I really had by then just about given up the idea that I was going to end up anywhere but a nursing home or that big institution. And this gave me hope back. And hope is a very important thing. And so I got a phone call from George and met with them, and they focused on my dreams instead of on my deficits. Everyone I had met with about housing before that always started the conversation with, tell us everything you cannot do. Well, there's a long list. But Pat and George and Beth started in a different place. And they said, tell us what you can do. Tell us what motivates you. Tell us what you're interested in, what you're good at. And then we'll worry about the other stuff too later. So so that was a whole different thing, and it was great. And the other thing they asked me was who was important in my life. And I listed my mom, my boyfriend at the time, a neighbor, a couple of friends from work, a couple of friends from college, people here and there. And this became the birth of my circle of support. And so my circle met together, and we told them about David's presentation, and I said that my vision was to live in an integrated, meaning not all disabled people want to live together, and I wanted an integrated, accessible home ownership option where I could know my neighbors and we could provide mutual support to one another. In other words, a housing cooperative. So off we went in search of a co-op. And that's a funny story because we just all got in cars and started driving around, looking at land they had for sale, signs on it, and then we'd all come back and talk. We had no idea what we were doing, none. And when we came back together and talked about all this land, we also kind of realized we don't have any money to do this. We're talking about building or buying something. We can't do that. My family can't do that. So we just went, we went around in circles for, I think, about a year. And eventually, through someone George knew, we were introduced to Sarah Page, who you're going to meet next week. And Sarah knew a lot about housing development and also disability from her work in Massachusetts. And so Sarah got a grant, came down to Connecticut, got a grant to try to involve disabled people in housing co-ops that were already being planned or underway. And we thought, oh, this won't be bad. We'll just find somebody and get them to include me and the other people who were also interested in co-ops. And that was a nice idea, but it fell through for a whole lot of different reasons. If they already were planning something, they already had in mind what they were planning. They didn't necessarily envision those of us with severe disabilities as part of their project. And then it just happened that all of us were from the suburbs, and the co-ops they were building were in the inner cities, which is good and important. But you drop me into the inner city, I don't know what to do. It's a different culture and a different place. And so we really had to kind of find something that built on the understanding that those of us had who were looking for this. And we were kind of looking for a suburban version of it, taking all the best of the other ideas and just moving them where we were. So again, we went around in circles for a while around all of that, and learned a lot, connected with some great people. But eventually through all of that, see, you think you're going in circles until you run into somebody as you're going around in the circle, and then you realize why you were doing that in the first place was in order to meet a certain person. So we eventually met Jack. And Jack was a kind of an eccentric, well-known figure in Hartford. And he had a softball team. And can you turn the page, please? Thank you. He had a softball team, and believe it or not, the softball team was made up of artists, and I had an idea at one point that the co-op might be like an artist community. That would be cool. But it also had architects, real estate people, building people, and just all these different sort of wheeler dealer Hartford people. And this softball team became eventually a housing development team that was committed to me, because I met them all and we won them over to our way of thinking, and were committed to me and to helping me and people like me achieve our vision of the co-op. And then they went on to become the board of directors of a nonprofit housing development organization that was created to help develop first one and then several more housing cooperatives. the first one in Manchester, where I live now. So as I said before, everything in this story is about relationships. So over the next 5 years, and it took 5 years from the time that I met Pat and George and Beth until I moved in here. So probably the last 3 years of the 5 was spent building relationships with the Department of Housing in Connecticut, legislators, especially a caring legislator from Manchester who really went to bat for us, the town planner, the community of Manchester, and especially a committed and connected community member who gave a ton of time and energy to our project. The seller of the land that we ended up buying, the architect, the general contractor, and there's probably more that I've left out, but that's a partial list. And Sarah, Sarah introduced me to all these people, sometimes one at a time, and sometimes in groups. There were events. There were like gatherings and meetings and social hors d'oeuvre things, because it was all about who do you know and how can we advance this agenda that we had. And what we told everybody, I told everyone and everyone else echoed it on my behalf. I don't want to live in a nursing home. You know, I was at that point probably 25 years old, you know, and ready to take on the world, but you can't do it from a nursing home. So that became our whole thing, is we need to build this co-op. We can't let Kathy end up in a nursing home. So we looked and looked for land around Hartford, you know, in the different suburbs around, especially in Manchester, which was my first choice of a town. And we had many disappointments, because part of a journey is you have a lot of disappointments. But eventually, have I said eventually enough times tonight? Eventually we found a site that was already approved and zoned for 16 condominium units that could easily be reconfigured into our co-op. And we made an argument, excuse me, we made an argument to the town and a presentation to the town that actually our co-op would be more attractive and more community-like than the 16 condos that were already planned. If you looked at the plans, they were just 16 units in a strip with a parking lot. You know, it was just very plain and not very creative at all. And what our architect did was swing it around. So we are actually more like a J shape. We have one long side and two short sides with a courtyard in the middle and a parking lot on the side. So of course, you know, when we brought it to the town to get these changes approved, they liked it. So that was good. That was good. We also turned to another nonprofit called the Corporation for Independent Living for financial and consulting assistance while still retaining control of our vision for the property and the project. And we had to do that because, and you will understand and laugh at this as we all did, you couldn't buy the land until you had the funding to buy the land. You couldn't apply to the state for the funding to buy the land until you had the land. You get that? So we were stuck in that for a little bit, but the Corporation for Independent Living bought the land, yay, held on to it. We applied for funding, and then we bought it from them. So it all ended up being okay, but sometimes you have to go the long way around, and sometimes it's a very long way around. Turn, please. So as I said before, it took 5 years from 1987, really, when my circle started, until I moved in here in 1992. And actually, a week from tonight is my 29th anniversary living here. And, you know, it's just like beyond amazing, everything that happened. And I'm going over it really quickly so we have time for good discussion at the end. But that's the short version of the story. I have a few more points I want to make, and then I really want to hear your questions and address your thoughts. The good news is I have stayed out of a nursing home. Yay. I'm 58 now. This is awesome. I have a beautiful, fully accessible unit. That's the envy of everyone who sees it. We did a great job designing it, and we're so lucky that we were able to make it all come together. I have gotten support from my neighbors when I've needed it, especially when I've really, really needed it. I've given my support to my neighbors when they've needed it, which is just as important. I mean, it needs to be a mutually beneficial arrangement, or it won't last. So I'm glad about that. I've also become much more independent, resourceful, and strong than I ever thought I would ever be. When I moved here at the age of 29, then, I had never been left alone. You know, my mom was very dedicated, and she made sure she either took me with her everywhere she went, or she got someone, like she used to, into my teens, she even hired babysitters, which I don't love that, but I had never been alone, so I didn't know what that would be like. And then the first 27, I guess, years of living here, I had a live-in assistant to do the overnight stuff. Not that I need a lot overnight, but just to have somebody here overnight. And in 2019, I lost someone who was here and never had been able to replace her. So I have learned over the last couple of years that I can stay alone at night. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a great thing or the ideal situation, but I have had no choice and I have had to learn it. And sometimes when you have no choice, you just got to figure it out. So we've done that for the most part. And now during COVID, it's been different. I've been very blessed to have someone stay here with me during COVID, but eventually, when that all straightens out, I need to go back and start looking for a live-in assistant again. So we will get there eventually. But the point is, I've learned how to be alone. I've learned how to be alone overnight and alone in the daytime. And sometimes if people don't show up to work or whatever, I have to get on the phone and figure that out too. And we have, and I'm still here, and it's okay. And it's not anything like smooth, but it works. So that's the good news. The bad news is the funding program that we used to build this co-op no longer exists. It was closed probably around 98 or 99. I'm guessing Sarah would know, but they didn't have it anymore, so we can't build co-ops under that system anymore. You have to look at other funding streams. Other bad news is we thought that as, you know, fellow business owners, because we're all owners here at the co-op, that would bring us together and create solidarity and unity and all that good stuff. Actually, the opposite is true. Because this is our small business. This is our housing co-op, and people have some very strong different opinions about how we should run it and what decisions we make. So we have spent a lot of time arguing about things. The good news about that is that we are somewhat able to separate our business arguments from our personal relationships. And I have always said that if, no matter how much we've been arguing about something, if somebody came against one of us, they would have to contend with all of us, because we do all have each other's back. So that's a good thing, but it's not that we all hang around in the evening and watch movies together, or some of the things that I had kind of dreamed of when we started. That did not turn out. The other thing I've learned is the importance of having a common enemy. As in, if it's an apartment, you can all get together and complain about the landlord. But here, we are the landlord. So then we're all complaining about each other. So there is something about having something to pull you together. So we're still trying to figure all that out. Managing the co-op is very time consuming. You know, we have to hire contractors. We have to make sure the books, you know, the bookkeeping is good, audits are done, empty units get filled. It's very time consuming, and the officers are all tired. And I've been an officer almost all of my 29 years here. And as happens with any endeavor, even though we require everyone in the co-op to fill a role, you know, take a position or hold officer status or do whatever, do something for the co-op. The reality is that there are a few of us that do it all the time. And it's very hard to get other people to step up and pitch in. So while I love the co-op model, it has some practical issues in implementation. And then finally, as time has gone by, some of the initial vision and cohesiveness had been lost. It's a little bit more like an apartment now and less like a co-op in some ways. But we are known as the best run co-op in Connecticut. So we're proud of that still. A lot of co-ops have folded up because they didn't manage their money well. So you have to be careful about that. One of the things that has sunk a number of co-ops is the sad reality that if one of your neighbors falls on hard times and can no longer pay their monthly, we call it a carrying cost. It's a blend between a mortgage and a rent. And if someone loses the ability to pay their carrying charge, you know, as a business, you can only carry them for so long. And co-ops, some co-ops have not been able to make the hard decisions necessary to keep the co-op afloat. So that's one thing. But the other thing is, I think some co-ops have just closed up because nobody wanted to be an officer anymore. There are about 7 of us that carry it, and every year we say we're going to turn it over to new people, and every year it doesn't happen. So that's a challenge. It's a challenge. You got to figure that out. Turn, please. Okay. All righty. So we're coming to the end here. My recommendations are start with the vision and work out from there, because you can never go wrong if you do that. Think about what kind of unit are you looking at? You know, is there a central hallway to be inside with neighbors? Is there a door directly to the outside? What does it look like? Who will live there? Does your family member live alone or with their family or friends or roommates? For me here, a big thing was air conditioning, because the state of Connecticut doesn't see that as a priority, but for some of us with some health conditions, it's really, really important to not get too hot. So we had to work around through policies and get separate funding, separate foundation funding to put in air conditioning here. Is home ownership important? Is that an important part of the vision? Support, what does that look like? Location, what does that look like? What is reasonable to expect from neighbors? How many neighbors? You know, some co-ops are little, they're just 3 or 4 units, and then some are big. There's one in Waterbury, Connecticut that's 102 units. I think that's kind of hard to implement though. And then if you're building something from scratch, who do you know? Or who can you meet if you don't know someone? Always assume it will take longer than you thought, and put plans in place to hang in there until it actually comes together. During those 5 years, when we were working on my dream here, my mom ended up in the hospital a couple of times, and we had to like scramble and figure that out, which we did. But you know, by the time I moved here at 29, my mom was 72. So she was sadly beginning her decline in health around the same time. One more thing, I'm going to say it again, relationships. Formal supports are critical, of course they are. And we have to make sure those are available to people. But it's also critical to have people who are there just because they care. Over the 29 years, my formal support system has collapsed a couple of times. And if I didn't have friends, to bail me out, I wouldn't still be here. I'd be in some institution somewhere. So it's very, very important to have layer after layer after layer of relationships. Housing is so important. It's a home base. It's a place that you can launch off of and do so many things. And I really support all of you in your housing search, but it's the relationships that make it work and make it last. So I'm going to stop there. I'd love to hear any questions or comments about anything.
Okay, and so if you want to chat, if you have a question, if you have an idea, just unmute your Zoom mic or unmute your phone, and we'll hear from you.
Hi, Kathy. It's Susan Raposo. Nice to see you again.
Oh, it's so good to see you again.
I know I loved, thank you so much for sharing your story. Again, this is the second time I've heard it, but I just love hearing it. And I totally agree. And I love the point that you made about the relationships and, you know, how important they are to your whole life. So I just, you know, I know how important relationships are to my life. So I completely understand that. So thank you for hitting that home like you did, you know.
Oh, thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
I think during COVID, everybody has such a sense and such an appreciation now of what we all mean to each other and what a good thing it is to be together. I mean, this is lovely here on Zoom, but it's not the same as being together. And I think for those of us who cannot get out of bed without assistance, I know what it's like to lie there in the morning when somebody calls out and I'm just like, oh, I'm stuck. And I start calling around and I always call all my assistants first. But if people aren't expecting it, a lot of times their phone is off or they don't hear it. And there may come a point where I have to call my friend Andrea or I have to call my friend Faith and just say, I'm waking you up. Can you come help me? I'm stuck and I don't know when anybody is coming today. And that's, you know, it's good to have friends, but it's also good to have lifelines. And I have to have a certain number of lifelines for when things break down, because they do. Yes, Casey.
Hi, Kathy. Thank you for telling your story. It was very interesting. I had a question about one of your comments about how you and others are on the board and how you keep meaning to move off and pass the torch, but how difficult that's been.
Yes.
Have you found there has to be long-term planning for something like that? Like, do you have contingency plans? Because I imagine that's a lot of work, although it seems like you can take a lot on. I imagine that after a while is going to be quite a task for the group of you.
Yeah, we have not really solved the problem. So if you have a specific method or methodology that you think would help us, that would be awesome. Somebody had an idea 2 years ago that each of us on the board would have an assistant. So as the secretary, I would have an assistant secretary. The president would have a vice president and so on. Treasurer, assistant treasurer. So they would shadow us for a year, and then at the end of the year, they would become the new one and we would phase out. Again, some of us have been doing this 7, 8, 9, 10 years or longer. And I thought it was a really worthy and workable idea, but it didn't happen. So we're still kind of stuck. So I don't have an answer for you.
Oh, okay.
Other,
Well, I'll
other
stay
than,
apprised.
yeah, well, I mean, would love to hear if you have a method for us.
Well, we're in the early stages, hopefully, of designing something similar. And if we ever do come across it, we'll share it.
Okay, that sounds good. And I don't mean to scare everyone. It's definitely a good model and I would do it again, but there are just, like anything in life, there are a few things that are less than ideal. And that's one of them. I have a friend, George knows her too, who lives in a co-op with just 4 units. So in a co-op with 4 units, guess what? You have to be an officer every year. You have no choice because it's only 4. So, you know,
Thank you.
So
thank you.
Kathy, and Casey, actually, let me ask a question, then maybe follow it up. Have you ever considered looking for a property management organization to help you with some of that work?
In answer to your question, John, we have a property management company.
Uh-huh.
We did not in the beginning when we first started here. I think we thought we could do all of it.
Yeah.
But we did for a while and then people were wearing out. So we've had a property management company probably 15 or 20 years,
Yep. Okay.
perhaps. And they do a good job as far as it goes, but mostly what they do is collect the carrying charges
Yep.
every month and send us a budget or a financial statement every month so that we know,
Yeah.
you know, of anything being embezzled or anything, which hopefully not.
Right.
But, you know, so we can keep an eye on things. But I think, I don't know how to explain this. Having a property management company is helpful to a point,
Mm-hmm.
but when you live here, there are the knocks at the door saying, okay, something broke. We need 3 bids. And then
Yep.
you gotta set up the 3 bids.
Right.
And any of you who've ever tried that,
Yeah.
you know how hard that is.
Yeah.
And then we have to have a meeting to pick one. And then people can't decide.
Right.
So it's the knocks at the door. It's all the things that happen other than just the money going back and forth.
Right.
And
Right.
there's just a tremendous, unbelievable, tremendous lot of detail.
Right. So that kind of leads me to my other point, and that is, I'm not convinced that there is such an entity either in Connecticut or Rhode Island at the moment. But I do believe that within the system that we kind of swim in,
Mhm.
that there is a need for a property management plus kind of organization
Hmm.
that can assist individuals, organizations, families to do this. There's, you know, there are parents who are often saying, I'm going to leave my house to my kid.
Mhm.
And then when they start interacting with their attorneys about all of the work that goes around that, making sure that the taxes are paid, that the roof is replaced, all of that stuff, it becomes obvious that somebody else needs to be part of that process. And I think of more like property management plus, probably somebody who's more oriented towards the world of people with disabilities than oriented to the world of people in the real estate world. And it would be great, this is a kind of a personal opinion here, but it would be great that if within the disability service world, that somebody would recognize this as an opportunity
Mhm.
for a new kind of service that would both help people like you who are in group, like co-ops,
Mhm.
people who are even just living in a condo, or people who are just living in mom and dad's house. Everybody needs more than just making sure that the mortgage is paid. And I call them property managers. There's probably a more descriptive and sophisticated term for that, but that's needed and it doesn't exist. And I think as I move along and thinking about, you know, what are the options out there, I'm always also thinking about what new kinds of ideas and services are needed to keep up with these new options. I love what you have said and what George has said in the past, that this is really all about relationships. And I'm pretty convinced that if all we do is take people who are living at home and put them into an apartment somewhere and think we've hit the goal line, we're mistaken. We haven't even gotten close to the goal line. The goal line occurs when that individual is part of a community where there are friends and neighbors and other people who know them and care about them and who are available, like some of your neighbors in a pinch, and not just your neighbors, but also your friends who are part of your network.
Yeah.
Tell everybody a little story about your network. I don't remember her name, but I was in Hartford about 15 years ago at a conference. And I don't even know whether you were there. I think you were there too, but we went out to dinner with a bunch of people at that conference. And somehow your name came up, and somehow the woman who was sitting across the table from me, who was attending that conference, said, I've been part of Kathy's network from its very beginning.
Aw.
What a great thing to hear, you know. That really said to me, wow, this is wonderful because this person knows Kathy. This person has these great values. And if I could tell you her name, you would automatically recognize her.
Wow. Well, that's a great story, John. Of the people that started in my circle in 1987, about half of them are still in it, and about half of them either, have sadly passed away or moved away or
Yep.
their lives have changed. I have some other people that have joined more recently, but I do have a number of people that are all the way back from the beginning.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not surprised that that would be the case.
I see that Trudy Chartier is unmuted. Trudy, do you have a question you wanted to ask?
Well, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you
I don't know
fine.
how to do this. I don't know how to.
Oh,
You
Just go
found
ahead,
it.
talk. Just talk, Trudy.
yeah, but now she's muted. Can't hear you yet.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. No, not now.
Have any thoughts you want to share, Trudy?
I think she's muted again.
Don't worry about the video. Just unmute yourself.
Unmute yourself, Judy, so we can hear you.
Lower left-hand corner of the Zoom, this little microphone icon that says mute or unmute. There you go.
Oh, I scared her away. Sorry.
Oh, I think she hung up.
We probably
I don't see her now.
messed her up.
Kathy and George, thank you for coming and sharing tonight. I have been inspired every single time I've heard this story, but the closer we come to needing to implement something for our mark and for all the other people who have similar needs, the more inspiring this becomes.
Yeah. George, would you mind maybe just spending a few minutes just kind of laying out a little bit more information about maybe some other individuals that you and Pat have been working or walking with over the years, and talk about, you know, where they're living, especially those people who are not necessarily living in a place where they purchase, but are just renting. Anyone come to mind that you could maybe
And George, you need
about?
to, George, you need to unmute your mic.
In the lower left-hand corner, George.
Okay, I think I got it. All
You
right.
got it.
All right. Oh, you didn't hear my words, Connie. Sorry. Thank you, Connie. That's what I was basically saying. Yeah, there's the thing that I think I'd like to focus on a little bit is when you build the relationships, the people in the circle of support begin to, and Kathy really did this for us. Her circle of support is such that she is was the focus, but everybody in the circle of support at one point or another needs support. So over the last 40 years with Kathy, you know, it's been, we've walked with a number of folks, people that we have been involved with that are in their own places, you know, are folks that many of them have issues with mental illness and such, and their relationship is really, really important, but also very, very difficult to sustain, as many of you may know already. But because it's, people can wear you out, and we just have not gone away, and that relates. One story I'd like to tell is the one of the gentlemen that was key in my own growth, if you will, was a gentleman named Todd Kilroy. He's passed. He passed in 1992, unfortunately. He and I shared the exact same birthday, except that he was 5 years older. And he was a gentleman that was very difficult to understand in speech, person with cerebral palsy. And when we were beginning this journey, Pat and I, to build circles of support and all, you know, had gotten a grant and, you know, all of that. And we asked Todd if he'd like to be a part of our grant. And he said, he put his head down and such and said no. And we couldn't understand why. And he said, look, I'm going to tell you why. He said, you are going to do wonderful things, and we're going to have just a great time for 3 years. And then you're going to go away. And I've been through that too many times. And I really don't want to do that again. Well, Pat and I think I'm going to get emotional right now, but Pat and I walked out of that room and we said, whoa. And we promised Todd and we promised each other that we would never do that. And so we do what we call the long walk. And Kathy and her circle and all of us is evidence of that. So I would say that
I keep losing it.
I think we got her back. Anyhow, that's one of the people we do have people in their own apartments, and all we can say there in terms of what we do, because we Comunitas is, we have the ability at this point, given our age, to do what we do without cost, and we've done that right from the beginning to the people with whom we walk. At first, it was because we had grants. Then after that, we just listened to what Todd had to say and continued the walks. So there are people that we just don't give up on, although they have very often given a lot of, people ask us, why in heaven's name are we still walking with? So I think the thing that is important is that find them relationships too. Again, the relationship issue that Kathy highlights is is really key. And I think if you read anything these days, that is a large part of any person's survival, in all kinds of ways, physical, emotional, spiritual. So that we do have a number of people right now because of COVID that we have to make window visits with, and that's sporting. So we and some of you would appreciate this, David. I think we've told you this, and we've told others. Many people know that I'm not the greatest of all technological wizards, and the fact that I'm on this Zoom is kind of a miracle, I think, to John. But we, Pat and I, have what we call Zoom meetings with folks with whom we walk. We Zoom up in our car to a driveway, set up 2 chairs, and they set up wherever they'd like to. Sometimes it's in a garage, sometimes it's on a porch, socially distance, all of that, and have a meeting. So we travel all over the place.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Yep. So is there anyone else who has any question that Kathy or George could answer? So maybe David, you've been involved for a very long time with these guys.
The founder.
The founder.
Oh.
We're all starting to.
The old one.
The old one. So what's your observation from your perch, so to speak?
My observation in listening to these 2 beautiful people present is that I know hundreds of people who need to hear from you. I know hundreds of people who not only need to hear this story, but who need to hear directly from you. And I know hundreds of, literally, we've been involved in the last 8 weeks in training 600 service coordinators in the state of Nebraska. We're going to be involved in, starting on Monday, we're going to be involved in Michigan, in reaching out to as many families and as many people with disabilities and as many community partners and circle members as we can possibly reach for the next 8 or 9 months. I want to make it possible for any and all of these folks to hear from you. So we'll be talking. I want to bring you onto the onto the team, because the way, not only the spirit and the quality, but also the way you describe the walk, the way you describe the periods of wandering around, the periods of going in for a kind of dive and then coming out, figuring it out and coming out are so important. And the thing that keeps you buoyed up and keeps your circle members and your friends and your other co-op members buoyed up is really important for people to understand. So I've just been touched to the point of head to toe goosebumps by what Kathy and George have done today. And I want to thank them from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you. Thank you, man.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.
Yeah. Again, I always talk about Plan Rhode Island kind of being a copy of Plan Canada, and about how those folks in Canada, in Vancouver, they went around the world looking for examples of kind of groundbreaking, motivational examples of doing the right thing. And I always say, it's remarkable that they landed, and one of the places was in Manchester, Connecticut, which is literally only about 60 miles from Rhode Island. and how distressing I find it to be that 60 miles away we have this group of gems, and it's so rare that we interact with them. They have so much to teach us, and we have learned so little from them, despite the fact that they're literally our neighbors.
Jill Ball posted in the chat, particularly with the need for what John's calling property management plus. How can this type of co-op work for people who live with mental health issues or intellectual disability? And I know we're getting to the end of our time together, but I just might mention that there's plenty of examples of these kinds of, especially scattered housing cooperatives, working very, very well for folks with very significant intellectual disabilities, mental health issues, and other kinds of living challenges. You heard a couple of months ago from Nicola Schaefer about her and her daughter's journey, and Kate, as far as I know, might be described as having a fairly significant intellectual disability. I can't figure out what she's thinking about. So we have but other people can. And I think that a combination of the work of building that blend of relationships and commitments and capacities and skill sets around exactly what a person brings to the table, what works for them, some clarity about what doesn't work for them, is possible in virtually every kind of circumstance that we can think of. So if I leave you with anything, it might be the fact that not only how can it work, but the fact that people have made it work. People have, in Kathy's words, figured it out because they've wanted to figure it out for the people they love, the people that they support.
David, this is Michelle Brophy from BHDDH. I thank you, Kathy and George, and
Thank you.
your presentation tonight was incredible. I just wanted to announce, we had talked to John about this. Betty Murray, who's on the call tonight, who's on the board of the plan, and I wanted to offer up on one of the Wednesdays. John had previously said that he just booked every Wednesday of the month. So we wanted to offer up what we're calling office hours. So February 17th from 6 to 7. And my coworker, colleague, and just the person who knows the most about DD services, Anne LeClaire, is on the call. And so we could tap into her. But just offer a time for people to come and talk to us. You've shown us so many different models and projects and that we could replicate in Rhode Island, but we wanted to start gathering information. One thing that, David, I've learned from every presenter you've brought here is that, they started doing this one case at a time. So, one person's dream, as Kathy said, what's your dream? And let's see if we can make it happen one person at a time. So if we could start hearing from people about what it is they like, we can start trying to connect you to the appropriate people in Rhode Island. So we're happy to do that. We'll try it on February 17th. If people like it, we can do it every month, or we can just talk to each other, because Betty and I are old friends and I always learn a lot from Ann.
And let me just remind everyone, next Wednesday is the time for us to, as a group, talk about maybe some more specifically about how we can do this. And Sarah Page, who was an integral part of helping George and Kathy, is going to be able to join us. She just got a new job, and she works now for the city of Fall River as their redevelopment coordinator. And they had a big city council meeting tonight, so she couldn't come, but she will be available next week. And so we can learn a little bit more about some of the nuts and bolts. And to whoever, Tom or whoever said, how can we do that? Well, one thing I learned from actually Kathy last night as we were talking about this is that so often when we think about housing for people with disabilities, we kind of are working with a person who we might characterize as a brown peg. And we look at the housing options as a bunch of squares. And we look about how can we fit this person, this round peg, into the square peg, into the square hole. And we need to stop that. We need to look at this brown person and say, what do we need to do to make it possible for this round person to find a round hole out there in the community, or how to build it
How to
for
build it. Yeah.
and
Kathy, that was not a shot at you, because I have learned not to take shots from John about being a round person before.
I'm just using Kathy's words here. But the point is, it's all about, as has been said, it's all about the person, what they need, what their family needs, what their family's resources are like, and crafting a life in the community for that person that fits their need, their whatever you want to call it.
And something that my beloved Faye has taught me over and over again is the idea of, as we're doing that, to open up the family circle and include more people, more community partners, more of those wonderful folks that you found in the softball team and so on, in the beautiful walk and the beautiful work that families are always doing. Because I think we know for a certainty that that people are more successful, and our endeavors are more successful as we build and expand those circles of support and creativity and connection and wild ideas. So,
Okay.
Thank you so much.
So thank you all.
Thank you,
We'll
David.
see you
Thank you, John.
next Wednesday.
Quick question.
Sure, Sharon, go ahead, real quick.
Sorry, it's to Michelle. I wrote down I would like to be there on the 17th. How do we get to there?
So the link that you use to get to here is now open every Wednesday night from now until the end of June. Use that same link. That's why we've made this change. It's now available, and it'll be, you can connect with Michelle. You can connect with somebody else. You can say, hey, let's get together and talk about this now that I've learned about it.
I remember you saying that now. I apologize. Thank you.
Same time, same station.
Same time, same station, same link.
And I just wanted to say thank you to Kathy and George, and
thank you.
And for your honesty in your stories.
Absolutely.
I was wonderful too, and and very moving. I can hardly say it now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night.
We'll see you all
God
next week.
bless.
Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.
See you,
Come
John.
back
Bye-bye.
next week.
Yep.
Yep.
See you,
See you
Kathy.
next week.
Bye-bye. See you, Dave. Bye.
Bye.
So Kathy and George, we got to talk. I have a little work for you. Okay.
Oh, dear.
All right.
See
Good night.
you later. Take care.
God bless.
Bye-bye.